There we go.
All right. All right, I just want to go over a few items with everyone before we get to cooking. If you guys have not joined us before, my name is Sophia. I'm one of the instructors with Culikid. A little bit about us. Culikid is a nonprofit that provides healthy culinary programs for people of all abilities. Our programs teach cooking skills and also healthy habits, as well as social independence and motor skills. As you may have just heard, this class is being recorded. But if you don't wish to be in the recording, you can always turn your camera off. And you might notice that you guys are all on mute, but you're more than welcome to unmute yourselves if you have a question, or you can always type that in the chat as well. Either myself or Kelly will be looking at that, so we can always answer your questions either way. This is our last class of the year, so thank you all for coming. But we will have plenty more coming in 2023, so keep a lookout on your emails for that. You'll get all that information. Links for everything will be sent in the chat as usual. And if you're cooking for someone at home, send us pictures. We love to see pictures of you guys cooking. That makes us so happy, and it's always great to see pictures of everyone. So if there's no questions right away, then we can go ahead and get started. Today, we are going to be making orange marmalade, which is really great. It's very easy to batch make, which is why if you guys are looking to double or even triple this recipe, it's great to gift or even just have and keep in the house. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to wash all our fruit, because we are keeping the rind on. So we're going to be using the rinds of the oranges, and then we're also zesting our lemon. So we want to make sure that we're washing our fruit really well. So if everyone wants to take a minute to just do that, we can just make sure, also remove any stickers if there's stickers on your fruit too. Let's just kind of get in there with your fingers and make sure you rub any dirt or anything off there. So then that way they are all set for using in the recipe. Then after you wash, just make sure you give them all a nice dry.
Hi, Kristen. So we just got started, but the only thing we've done so far is just washing our fruit. So if you haven't done that, make sure to wash it, since we'll be using the rind. So you want to make sure you get it nice and clean.
All right, and then once everyone has their fruit all set, just give me a thumbs up and we can go on to the next step. I see some already. Awesome, awesome. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to work with one orange at a time, and we're going to cut them into the sizes that we're going to need. So the first thing you're going to want to do is cut the ends off, because you can see the ends are kind of, it's mostly just rind. So what that might do is make it a little bit bitter. So you just want to take your knife and you want to hold your orange very carefully and just cut off the slightest amount from each end, just like this. So just so you get that extra rind off, and you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side here. So just a little slice off like that. And then once everyone's done that, we'll give thumbs up and then we will go on to the next part of cutting. I see some already. Everyone's doing great. Does anyone need more time to cut off the ends? Or are we all good? I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, so I think we're all set. Okay, great. So now what we're gonna do is you're gonna take that orange and you're gonna cut it in half down the middle. So those two ends that you cut are going to be right in front of you. And then you're just gonna take your knife and cut right down the middle like that. So now you have two halves, right? So you're gonna work with one half at a time. You're gonna cut that half down the middle, turn it, and then cut it down the middle again. So we're gonna end up with 4 pieces from this orange half, right? So we have 4 pieces there. How's everyone doing with that, okay? Good, I see everyone's working on that. So if you have that done, then you're gonna do the exact same thing to the other half of the orange that we set aside. So we're gonna cut it down the middle, turn it, and down the middle again. So one whole orange should give you 8 pieces. So you want 8 little chunks from one orange. And once you have your pieces, you can set them into your, if you don't have a food processor, a blender is totally fine. I am using a food processor, so you can just throw those orange pieces just right in your bowl or in your blender, whatever you guys are using.
Sophia, I think some people are making more than what we're demoing. So like,
Okay.
how many do you think, like, do they maybe need to work in batches if they're doing more than 2 oranges?
So when I tested the recipe, I did, it was a double just to see, and I was able to fit 4 oranges in my food processor. Mine's like, oh wait, yeah, there we go. It's like this big. It's not huge. It says this size is 12 cups, my food processor, and it fit 4. It was a little bit of a squeeze, but it does tend to break it down quickly. I would say probably just judge it depending on the size of what you're working with. Like my blender, for example, if I was using that as well, I could probably fit 4 in here. But if it looks like it's a little full, I would definitely work in batches just so you don't overcrowd it or potentially break any machine that you're using. So I would say probably maximum 4, unless you're using a smaller machine, but it happens very, very quickly when you pulse it. So definitely work in batches based on what size and how many oranges you guys are using.
Does anybody have any questions about that?
All right, does everyone have 1 orange done so far? If so, then you can go ahead and do the exact same thing to your second orange and your third and fourth, or however many you are going to be using. So you're just going to want to do the exact same thing. We'll cut the ends off. Cut down the middle. And then cut each half into quarters. So once everyone is all set with all of the oranges that you're using, just give us a thumbs up and then we can go ahead and pulse those in the machine. I see some people still working. How many people, if you give me a raise of a hand, how many people are doubling the recipe? Okay, I see 1, I see 2. Is anyone tripling the recipe? Or are we just pretty much working with, oh, I see Caitlin's doing 4 times. Okay. All right, so we have mostly doubles and then a 4 time. Is anyone doing the single recipe that I'm making? Okay, I see a few people are. Okay, so then I'll just make sure to kind of keep all those measurements in my head and give you guys what you would be using for yours. How's everyone doing on their oranges? Does anyone need more time? If so, that's totally fine. Looks like some people are still cutting. All right, I see another thumbs up. Is everyone good? Okay, great. So now what we're going to do is you're just going to either use your food processor or your blender, whatever you have, and most of them should have a pulse function, which is just, it allows you to control how many times. So if you see mine is, I don't know if you can read it, but I have an on and off and a pulse. So you want to make sure whatever machine you're using is plugged in, it's locked into place, and the lid is tightly on so nothing squeezes out. But you're just gonna pulse to start breaking everything down. And you'll see it's already happening really quickly. Those big orange chunks are getting much smaller. So you're just gonna do that until the pieces are quite small. I'll show you guys what it should look like once it's done. Yeah, this is a good size here. So if you can see, it kind of looks like almost like a paste. And there's the darker pieces are those pieces of the rind that are also going to be, so I'd say they're probably like a 1/4 of an inch big, something like that. But it's going to look like pasty, kind of like that. So once it looks like that, you'll know that you are all set there. You can always make them bigger or smaller depending on whatever your preference is when using it. This will spread like a jam or a jelly once it's done. So just keep that in mind when thinking about size. So once you guys have everything pulsed and it's all set, give me a thumbs up. I know some people might have to work in batches, so take your time with that. If you are working in batches and you have to take your oranges out in order to make room, you can just put them into the pot that you will be using to cook it, because that would be our next step anyway. So just for anyone that might need to take their oranges out a little bit earlier. And you can see it did break down a lot. So mine was almost, I'd say it was like 3/4 of the way full. Now it's all the way down here. So it does break down. I see a bunch of people getting their oranges in there. Oh, wow, that looks great. That's perfect. And then another thing to keep in mind is if you are doubling or tripling or quadrupling, you're just going to want to make sure that the pot that you use is equivalent then to the size. We're adding mostly, there's not much that we're adding, but you just want to make sure it's big enough. When I doubled my recipe, I used this pot here. I definitely didn't need to use this size pot, but it was just good because there was plenty of room in there for it. So you just want to make sure that you guys are using a pot that's big enough as well. All right, is anyone still, I see Caitlin's still working a little bit. How's everyone else doing? Okay, great. And how many people are going to gift their jars that they're making? Is anyone gifting? I see a few people. Is anyone going to keep it for themselves or keep some for yourself anyway? You always could. You can always gift some and keep some. It is pretty good. So I would suggest keeping a little bit for yourself. But it is a great present to give as well. And we're going to go over as well while we're cooking how we can decorate the jars and make them look nice if you guys are going to be giving them as a gift. I'm going to be using a jar that I actually already made earlier this week when I was testing. So this one, this is the size that I was using. These are, I believe, the 8-ounce jars. So these are like a really great little size to give away to people. My recipe makes 3. So if anyone's making the single recipe with me, that'll give you 3 jars. And the double gives you 6. And so on and so forth. You'll get 9, 12, however many you guys want. And for anyone who has just joined, we are up to the point in the recipe where we just processed or blended, whatever machine you might have, our oranges. So that is step 6 we just finished. And we're almost ready to go on to step 7. Okay. All right. So then we are going to start getting everything in the pot. Okay. So we're going to take our oranges, whatever pot you are using. I am using my big one again, because this is my favorite pot. You're just going to pour your oranges into your pot. If you are using a food processor, where the blade comes out, just make sure you do take that out first very carefully and just set that aside so that does not fall out into the pot. And then just using a spatula or a spoon, whatever you may have, just dump all of those oranges into the pot or pan that you're using. All right, so once everyone has their orange mixture in their pot, we'll do a thumbs up and keep going. I see one. I see your chat, Joanne. Thank you. Everyone's doing great so far. All right, does anyone need any more time? Or are we all set? Okay, looks like everyone's all set. So before we add the oranges onto the stove, I just want to zest the lemon into our mixture beforehand, just so that we're not doing that over heat. So you're gonna take your pot or pan, have that in front of you, and we need the zest from half of a lemon. So we're not gonna cut it first, just so that it's not all messy. So we can kind of just eyeball it. So you want to take the zest from about half of your lemon. It doesn't need to be perfectly exact, but instead of cutting it, it would become a little bit of a juicy mess. So either using a microplane or a grater, whatever you guys have, just zest it like this. And if you guys were in the Thanksgiving class, I was teaching how, so when you're zesting any kind of citrus, you want to look for, once it gets this lighter yellow or lighter orange or green, whatever you are zesting color, that's when you know you've gotten enough, so you can move on to the next section. Otherwise, this part right here underneath, that's a little more light yellow or white, tends to be a little more bitter. So that's why usually 3 or 4 strokes will get you that darker yellow part. And that's all you need. So just go around the half of your lemon and get all that out. All right, so yeah, about half of my lemon is zested, and you can tell this whole part is all the lighter color and this is the darker color. I'm just gonna tap off any excess that might be stuck in there. So once your lemon is zested, shoot me a thumbs up and we'll go on to the next step. Caitlin, I see you. Awesome. Joanne, thanks. See you. I see another one. The name on the screen is Jody. Is that your name, or is that the Zoom's name? I want to make sure I call the right name. Jack and Jody. Okay, great. So I see your thumbs up, Jack. Thank you. And thank you, Jody. All right, looks like everyone's all set. So then now we are going to cut our lemon, since we will need the juice. So we're going to be juicing the half of the lemon as well. So we can use the exact same side or the other side, doesn't really matter. But so we're just going to cut that lemon in half. And we're going to juice it into a smaller bowl, because if the seeds come out, then you can easily remove them before they end up in the marmalade mixture. If you have a citrus squeezer, you can use one of those. I'm just going to use my hands and just get all that juice out. And if you can see, I already have like 6 seeds in there. So this, I always like to do it like this, so that way none of the seeds get stuck in whatever it is that you're making. So you can get all of the juice out there, and then just using a spoon. If you have any seeds stuck in your juice, you can just take those out and add that juice right into the orange mixture. So I'm just going to take these seeds out without taking out any of the juice. And then again, for those who are doubling, you'll use the whole lemon for the zest and the juice. Sorry, I forgot to say that earlier. And for 3 times, you would use 1.5, 4 times, 2 lemons. And you guys will get a document after class as well. I wrote a bunch of different tips for changing the recipe size, for making it a gift, or if you're storing it for refrigeration time and freezer time, and other recipes that you could use the marmalade in, so that if you have a little bit left over, you could try and make it into something else. Oh, and Kelly just put it in the chat already, so that's great. How's everyone doing? Our lemon, it's all set. Jack, I see you. Awesome. Caitlin. All right, looks like we're all set. So now we're going to take our orange mixture and put it onto the heat to get it started. So I'm just setting it on my stove, and we're going to do medium heat. I'm just going to give it a little stir just so that all of the lemon zest and lemon juice is incorporated. And then we can just let it hang out for a bit while we finish the last few steps. So once your orange marmalade is on the stove and a little bit of a stir is given, thumbs up, and then we'll measure the last 2 things and add those in there. All right, looks like everyone is all set. So now we are going to just measure out our sugar. So if you're working my recipe, you'll need 2 cups of sugar. If you are doubling, you'll need 4, tripling 6. So you're just going to take 1 cup, or if you need more than that, you can always, I know there's a 2-cup measurement, but my 1 cup fits in my bag perfectly. So I'm just going to grab out. And I'm going to use my knife again, like we have in the past. You're going to take a knife on the edge on the back that's not sharp, and just level across. I try to do this above the bag so I can get any extra. Sometimes it falls over. That's totally fine. But you just level it off so you don't have extra sugar in there. And then that way you have the perfect flat. And then you can just add that into a bowl. And then just do that again, however many times that you need to. My sugar is kind of low, so I'm going to have to pour a little bit and then level. As you can see, I already made a little bit of a sugar mess here, so it happens. Totally fine. So again, I'm just leveling it off and then just adding it to my bowl with the rest of the sugar. So once you've got your sugar measured, thumbs up. And then we have just one more thing to measure after that. And then we can just get cooking. All right, looks like we are all set. So then what you're going to want to do is just bring your sugar over to the pan or the pot that you're using. Just pour that in and then you can give it a good mix until it's all incorporated with that orange mixture from before. So now it's all mixed together. So once your sugar is added and mixed, give me one more thumbs up, and then we just have to add one last thing, and then we can just let it set. I see some thumbs up already. So as you guys can see, this recipe is super, super easy. So it is a great thing to do during the holidays since it does not take a lot of time at all. All right, it looks like everyone's all set. So now we just have to measure our water and add it to the pot. If you are making the single recipe like I am, you're going to start off with 2 tablespoons of water, and then we can always add the extra tablespoon if we need it. If you are doubling, you're going to do, I believe it's a 1/3 cup of water, and then triple would be 2/3, I think. I don't know. I wrote it down. It's in the document. Let me just double check before I say it. Okay, so no, for a triple recipe, it would be a 1/2. And then for 4 times, it would be 2/3. So what I like to do if I'm, especially for tablespoons of water, if you're using more than that, then you can always just use a measuring cup. But I always like to get a little ramekin of water like I have here. And then I just take my tablespoon and dunk it in to get that full tablespoon of water and then just dump that right in. But if you need at least 1/3 of a cup, you can always use just a measuring cup. So once I have the water, I'm just going to stir it again. And we want the mixture to come to a boil, which is the bigger bubbles. So just give it a good stir. And then we just want to wait for it to come to a boil with the big bubbles, which will take a little bit of time. But once everyone is all set with that, just let me know. And then we can go over some gifting stuff as well while we wait for this to come to a boil. Jack, I see you. Awesome. All right, how's everyone doing? Okay. Awesome. Okay, so I am just keeping in mind my marmalade on the stove. Usually you can hear it when it starts to boil because those bubbles are bigger, so they will start to make a noise. So while we wait for that to come to a boil, we can start going over some of the gifting stuff. And I will let you guys know when mine looks like it starts to come to a boil because yours might be happening around the same time as well. Actually, as you can see right now, it's not boiling yet, but those pockets right there are bubbles that are starting to form. So it's working its way there. But I will also show you guys what it should look like when it's boiling as well. So in the meantime, for anyone who is gifting, you can put them in these little jars like I did earlier. I said, these are the 8-ounce jars. You could even do bigger jars too, especially if you're making more. It will just make a little bit, it would make less jars if you use a bigger jar, but that's totally fine depending on how many people you want to gift it to. So there's so many different things that you can do. You can add a ribbon, which I'll show you guys. I cut this ribbon earlier to make a bow for it to see if it would fit. You can add a card with the ribbon as well. There's a lot of cute gift tags or stickers that you can add. And then you can personalize those with a note too. But I'm going to show you a bow at least. So this is a little bit shorter, but you would want your ribbon, you would want to cut it to be at least 2 feet in length. Whenever working with ribbon, I always like to have extra because you can always cut excess off afterwards. Which is why this is a little bit shorter because I did cut the excess off. But what I like to do, especially with a jar, I like to lay it down. So I'm going to have my ribbon like this. And just kind of lay the jar right in the middle for the most part. And then I just take the ribbon and then you can keep it thick like this. So it's a big bow, or you can scrunch it up a little bit so it's a little more skinny, whatever you want to do. So I would usually first just make a knot right in the front. So I have that to work with. And then I have my 2 sides here. And then from there, you can either make another knot. So it's just more of a knot bow like that, not like a crazy bow, but like this is one way that you could do it. Instead of doing a second knot, you could do bunny ears to make it into more of a classic bow. So I'm going to make one ear, tie the other ear around. And then that gives you more of a classic bow. And then you can fix the ends so that they are underneath like that. So then this gives you more of like a classic bow look. It's a little crazy right now, but it's always easy to mess with these. Something like that. You can use any color ribbon too that you have. If you are adding a card, a good thing to do is to hole punch it. I don't have good cards, so otherwise I would show you guys myself. But you like to like the thick cardstock paper is really good to use, or anything that's thicker than a traditional piece of printer paper, so it's not flimsy. You can hole punch it in the corner, and then I would add it on after you make your first knot here, and just slide it on here so that you have it where my thumb is, and then you can make the bow from there. Or you can use one of the stickers, like I said, something like that. But my favorite kind of bow is the bunny ear bow. So I'm going to go back to that. And you can make your 2 ears about the same size, and then your 2 strings here like that. So then you have a little bow, and it's a perfect gift. You could even add a label up here. Or another thing that you could do that would be great for gifting is if you wanted to get some sort of plain label, and then you can write the storing instructions on there so that's whoever you're giving it to knows how long it'll last. You could share the document with them that I made so that they could also see other ways to use it aside from just eating it on like something like toast. And then I'm gonna pause for a second because I do hear some bubbles. So let's go look at this. Okay, yep. So this is definitely boiling. So you see there's a lot of those bubbles in the middle there. You can even wait like maybe a little bit longer, but I don't want it to burn. So if it looks something like that, you just want to give it a little bit of a stir. So that nothing is stuck on the bottom. And once you do have that boil, you want to turn your heat down to low. And then you're going to set a timer for 30 minutes. So I'm going to do that right now.
And your larger batches might take longer to boil, especially Caitlin's, who has 4 times in there. So the more stuff you have in the pot, the longer it's going to take to boil. So if yours isn't there yet, don't worry.
You also might need a little more time than 30 minutes, depending on how it cooks down. So you can always add more time at the end if you need to, after seeing what it looks like. If you can tell now, based on what the mixture, the structure of it is, if you try and take a little bit and it slides off in pieces, as you can see, it doesn't all come off at once. It kind of just drips down. When it's ready, it will slide off a spatula or a spoon almost in a sheet. So the whole thing will just go off all together instead of separately dripping off the way that it is now. So all of that would all be gone. So that's a good way to check to see if it's done, because sometimes it will take a little bit longer. The recipe says 30 to 35 minutes, but sometimes it can be even a little bit longer than that. So don't be discouraged if it does take longer than that 30 to 35 minutes. I think when I tested the recipe, which I did, that was a double recipe, it took around 35 to 40 minutes probably. But that all depends on the pot that you use in the stove. So all of that stuff can change. So just use however much time that you guys do need. There's no problem with needing more time for that.
So if you have a couple questions, one is like, how worried should we be about overcooking it? Like, is it better to let it go a little bit longer if we're not sure? Or is like, how much would we have to cook it for it to, be overcooked?
I would say it's not easy to overcook this. So cooking it a few minutes longer definitely couldn't hurt. The only thing you do want to be careful of, since there's a lot of sugar in here, would just be it burning. But again, since we have it on low heat, that really shouldn't happen. That would only really happen if the heat was really, really high. So I would say if you're feeling a little iffy about it, you can always just give it a few extra minutes. That won't hurt.
And then the other thing is, I'm wondering if maybe you can open the jar of the completed marmalade and show them the texture of that.
Of course. So let me get so this one I made, I want to say 4 or 5 days ago. I can't remember. So it definitely, even after it's done, it won't look super, super thick, but once it's refrigerated and cooled, it does too. So as you can see, it's like thick enough to the point where it won't come out of the jar. So it's spreadable with a knife. So it's almost like your typical jelly or jam consistency, but it's just thicker. But when you spread it, there's more chunks in it kind of, but it's a thick consistency. Like that.
And is that more or less how it looked out of the pot, or has it changed because it's cooled down now?
After out of the pot, it won't be that thick. I think the refrigerator definitely helps, or the freezer, whatever you may be doing, that definitely helps thicken it. So it won't be this thick when it comes out of the pot after it's done cooking, but it should be thicker than when we just added it, since the sugar and the water is going to be evaporating too, both from the fruit and the water that we added as well.
And then I just wanted to make a couple points about the freezing versus storing it in the fridge. I know you guys have all of this, and I will email it to you again, but If you store it in the fridge, it will stay good for 2 weeks. So think about when you're going to give it to somebody, if it's going to be in 2 weeks or if it's going to be beyond that, you probably want to freeze it first, right? So if you're giving it to somebody 2 weeks from now, it's already right on that edge. So you want to give it to them with enough time to use it, right? So it's think about the date that you're going to give it to somebody and think about whether it's best to store yours in the fridge or the freezer. And again, this is all in your document too, but when you're freezing something hot, you want to make sure that it cools down completely. So you don't want to put it very hot into your jar and put it right in the freezer. You want to let it come all the way to room temperature and then put it in the freezer. And does anybody have any questions about that, about how best to store it or anything like that? Or what about how to tell when it's done? Any questions about that, or do you all feel confident? Okay,
Awesome.
looks like everybody feels good.
I want to show you guys because mine is simmering really well right now. So you can see these bubbles are definitely smaller than the ones that we had before when it was boiling. There are probably more of them, but they're smaller and they're going very nice and slow. So that's what you want your pot to look like when it's simmering during that cook time. So if yours looks like that, that's great. And I would say too, just for coming to room temperature, I would let it sit in the pot for a little bit once it's done cooking, just so it can cool off. You don't have to wait the full time to add it to the jars. What I did was I let mine cool in the pot for about 20 minutes, and then I separated it into my jars and then let those jars sit out on my counter until they came to room temperature and they were uncovered. So then that way this it'll help it cool down a little bit quicker. So make sure if you do that, you don't put the tops on the jars just yet. And then it took almost about like 2 hours, I would say, for it to be fully cooled. And then once that's ready, you can put the lids on and put those in the fridge, in the freezer. Also, if you're making a lot and you're freezing some, you don't have to put it in a jar. Like I had some extra and I just put it in a typical storage container. So I did 3 jars because I'm going to give those to some of my friends. And then I stored the rest of it in this kind of container. So you don't have to use jars, especially if you're just leaving it for yourself. You can just put it in any regular container as well. But same process. You want to make sure it does cool completely first. Does anyone have any questions about anything?
Looks like everybody seems all set.
Awesome.
So like Sophia said, this is our last class of the year, but we'll have more coming up. They'll be on a monthly basis again in the following year. We'll be coming up with those and getting you the information so you can register for those soon. But in the meantime, everybody enjoy the rest of your December. Happy holidays for whatever you're celebrating. And we look forward to cooking with you again soon. Oh, wait, we have one question before we head off. Serena just asked in the chat, can you use blueberries or other fruit?
Okay. So you definitely can. The only thing is the measurements of everything might be a little different. Like the recipes that you would use to make up like a blueberry jam or raspberry or any other kind of jelly or jam. It's definitely pretty much the same process. It's going to be like lemon juice, whatever fruit it is, and sugar. The measurements just might be a little different. So I would just do a quick Google search just to make sure you have correct proportions, especially since something like berries would probably be measured more in a cup versus 2 oranges, something like that. So you just want to make sure that there's something that gives you the correct proportion. So I wouldn't directly substitute berries for this recipe, but you can definitely use this process to make any other kind of jam or jelly or something like that.
Definitely. Any other questions? I think we hopefully got them all. You're welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Again, enjoy the rest of your weekend, the rest of your December, and we look forward to cooking with you all soon.
Thank you guys. I love cooking with you all. I hope everyone has a happy holiday, and I will see you guys next year.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.